Hello, YouTube. Today I just want to make my mechanic guide on the sandlord mechanic, or Oasis. So sandlord's a very interesting one. If you've played the Path of Exile before, you might be familiar with Settlers of Calgary. This is basically, instead of Settlers of the Cowgirl, this is Settlers of the Catgirl. This mechanic works in a very similar sense, where it has an in-map aspect where you fight enemies to gain gold, and then an out-of-map aspect where resources that you gain from the in-map mechanic, including as well as the gold, is used to mine and like convert your raw materials into like a good, and then you can use those goods to trade with. And then when your boats, or in this game it's the, what do you call it even? The gliders and the boats, oh yeah, I guess it is boats, return back home, you then get resources. So before we get to anything, let me just show you the in-map mechanic first, so you can see what it's all about. So once you enter the map, you'll eventually encounter a circle on the ground. These circles do tend to have like 4 to 5 spawn points in every map, but they always spawn like the same spots, they're not completely random. And once you interact with it, it'll start spawning waves of enemies. The amount of waves that spawn is random, but you can spec points into it, the mechanic, to make it spawn more waves. And after every wave, it will either be a green glow. The green glow essentially means materials and gold. So you'll just get a chunk of materials and gold when the wave finishes. And the pink glow means you have a chance to get a new recruit from the mechanic. Now, the recruits are essentially the workers of the mechanic. So instead of like spending your gold to find the workers, you need to do maps and kill the enemies to hire the workers, or to, I guess, kidnap the workers, would probably be more accurate to say. Let's do one more, because I think it's better to just leave a worker on the ground that you can see it. Unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with the map layouts in the zone, but I have a rough idea where every like sandlord thing can spawn. So yeah, this is a pink wave, so there's a chance we get a worker, and we got one. So here we got a crystal worker contract. This level 7 and a minor contract level 7. So what essentially this means is we're now going to add level 7 workers to our oasis. Now you can access the oasis by either clicking the top right here, which is kind of covered my chat right now, where you can then teleport to the oasis and interact with the mechanic. Or if you are not in a map and you want to access it, there's also an NPC in the middle of the town. Right here. You can speak to Jessomino, and she's gonna have a few options available to her. So the first option is Intercloud Oasis, which we'll do in a sec. There's the Oasis Overview, which is the menu you saw prior, which you can access from the map. Then there's also blending rituals, which is the belt blending system, which I'll get to in a bit. And there's the aroma shop. Essentially, any blend materials that you have, you can exchange for a higher level material by using a set amount of the lower material. So if you have 6 level 1 materials, you can get a level 2 material. With all of that being said, let's break down the mechanic a bit further and just explain it more. So I mentioned that there's levels in this mechanic. The way the levels work in this mechanic is when you go into it, you will have a main town hall that you have to level up. This town hall is this big crystal in the middle, which will start at level 1. And every level in this town hall allows you to recruit laborers that are a level higher. And it will also say which level those laborers will come from. So if you do deep space, you can get level 8 laborers. If you do Profound, which is zone level 89, you only get level 7 laborers, which is why we kept getting level 7 laborers, but not level 8 laborers. And as you're upgrading your main town, you will notice that it will have set requirements. So down here you have your mine, and the mine is set into 2 things. The production line, let me move my model. The production line and, sorry, the ingots production line and the magic crystals production line. These are essentially just the same thing, it's just random materials you get throughout the map. Now, by default, it will have it set in this order of like floating ingots at like a low level. Then the next level, you unlock quicksand ingots. Then the next level, you unlock flame ingots. And then the next level, level 4, you'll get drugstore ingots. But if you feel like you need more of a certain type of ingot, you can also just change this around willy-nilly. However, please note that when you do get these workers, you'll actually see that at the higher levels, they come with stats. So if I click on my quicksand worker here, you'll see that she gives me 81% additional ingot productivity, and then reduced wage cost when producing floating ingots, and additional output when producing quicksand ingots. So it's very optimal that if you do have, whatever spread you do have, to make sure that every single worker you have has at the very least the additional output when producing X ingots. Now, it's always worth it to use a higher level worker rather than like worrying about having a worker that has the correct stats on it. But once you do like get a bunch of workers and you can sort of min-maxing it, it is worth it to get the stat on every single ingot to make sure that you're producing the maximum output at all times. Similarly, we also have it with magic crystals, and the system goes on. Now you can level up both the ingots and the magic crystals separately, which will be required to progress the Oasis core. And in general, it's just going to be recommended, because even if your Oasis core is, let's say, level 8, if your ingots and magic crystals are not level 8, then you will not actually spawn any level 8 workers for either of them. You do need to have it level 8 to be able to have the level 8 workers spawn in. Then similarly on the left here, we will have the food area. And this is basically just where all your chefs are going to go. Exact same thing as the ingots and the magic crystals, just the sum of food. Now, as you can see, my food is not actually optimized yet. I have not played the season too much, so I do not have like perfect workers in every slot. I also don't have any, I mostly don't have any level 8 workers, which is obviously a very big issue to have. But just playing the game and mapping, you'll eventually get everything sorted out and everything optimized properly. Now, a very nice thing about this is any stat that is relevant to your like production line, so for example, we have secret recipe jerky here, will be highlighted. So we have this green glow around G. G always means wage cost. And then any other letter is going to be a good letter. So I know, for example, with this jerky, if I see a D, that is additional output for the beef jerky, which is why I'm clicking on all the Ds. And that sounds a bit wrong, but yeah. And then lastly, we have the airships and gliders, which we can level up to level 8. And this is essentially where all the spending is. So these 2 production lines, or like, I guess 3 production lines, are used to take your raw materials, which you get from mapping. This is your raw magic crystals. And your raw like bread, your jam, all of these raw materials that you see here gets converted into ingots, magic crystals, and water. I believe the only mechanic that you actually have to farm in maps is the food. Magic crystals and ingots don't need any resources to get mined or farmed. Only the food for the chefs needs to come from the maps. You can then spend that on the airships. So the way the airship is going to work is essentially you're going to have 3 main islands you can level up. There's going to be the Sand Island, which is the basic starter one. The Reservoir Island. And then the Jungle Island, which each one of these is like incrementing in, I guess, this difficulty of the recipes that you need to like fill the requirements in. As you can see, Sand Island, we only need 13,000 quicksand ingots. Whereas for the Reservoir Island, we need 147,000. And for the Jungle Island, we actually only need 8,000, which is a bit strange. This is supposed to be the third tier one, but whatever. And then for the Utopia Island, we need 500,000, which is like, this is like the absolute end game one. Unfortunately, don't know what the best strat is. Everyone has their own opinion on the best way to play this mechanic. I personally believe that if you're in desperate need of money in the short term, always make sure that you're at the very least filling an order requirement whenever you send a bounty out. Because when you do fill an order requirement, I do believe you gain a bonus drop quantity to your shipment, and just max it out. The ideal thing to do is to max it out and then just barely finish the requirement. So right now, if I were to max this out, I won't barely finish this requirement, so I would actually refresh this to try and get one where I do fulfill the requirement. Now, occasionally when you refresh it, you will actually see that the texture changes. So this says moderate amount of gear and commodities. Sometimes when refreshing, it will like give, say, lots of gear and commodities, and the requirement will be double what it usually would be for this island. But if we refresh it again, it goes back down to moderate amount. And in this case, we do have enough bread, so I'm just going to send the bread out. And I will just send out... Actually, let's first take... Okay, so once you send it out, this is the reward screen. I did have this prep beforehand, but I'm going to show the reward screen first, because if you look at the stats on my guys, all 3 of these on my main airship have 70% ordered reward quantity and 70% chance to double the reward quantity, which is like the optimal setup to have. So you want to have A, B, or BA on every single one of them, and the rest of my airships just aren't set up for that right now. So I don't actually want to send out any of these. But if you click settle, this right here is the pet proc. I'll get into what the pet does in a bit. But essentially what it did is it doubled this page. Now this first page, you see, this is actually the reward for finishing whatever the bounty reward was. So if you go back to this requirement right here, if you finish this, you'll get an extra pop-up. The first pop-up that you get is essentially the reward for finishing this. So from our jungle island, we got this, which also got doubled. So we got 1 FE that got doubled to 2, we got 1 level 2 material that got doubled to 2. And we can withdraw that. And now here's like the real reward, which is essentially all of the stuff that we put in. Brings us back materials that can be used for belt lending. So all these materials are going to be used in belt lending. Raw FE, and then just in general, like niche stuff. You get some compasses, you get some probes, you get some cords, you get some embers, and you get some fossils. And then similarly, I'm gonna send out my airship here, because we can finish the requirements. And if we're lucky, we're actually gonna have a pet proc. We weren't lucky, no pet proc. Reposo. Now, this is the airship system. The airship system is essentially where all the materials that your catgirls are farming for you go into these airships, and that gets converted to raw FE. I mentioned before that like there's different strats you can do. I personally am just an enjoyer of like sending a shipment a day. It takes roughly a day to like fill up a Utopia island shipment like requirement. So I'll just send like 1 Utopia a day. But there's no like right way to do it as far as I'm concerned. And the island you send to, once they're all maxed out, as far as I'm aware, is not relevant. I've not really found like any testing from people that have proven like X island's better than Y island, and seemingly it's just whatever the fuck you feel like. Then there's a glider system. So I mentioned that this whole thing runs on gold, right? The glider system is essentially the built-in gold spender. So every, I believe, 8 hours, you will have a glider charge run up. I probably should have emptied one of my gliders to prepare for this. So the way the glider system works is you're going to see here, remain deployment attempts 3 out of 3. This means that I can send a free glider right now. And I can send it to any of these islands as long as it says 3 out of 3. Boom, I send my glider. Next time that this comes back, you see it's going to say 2 out of 3, and in 6 or 5 hours and 20 minutes, it will generate me another charge. If these charges run out, you can still send the gliders out, but it's going to ask then a hefty fee to send the gliders out. At level 8, this fee, I believe, is 24.888, like 24.888 gold. So essentially 25k gold per glider, which means that you are sending out every hour, or like every 30 minutes, you're sending out 100k gold. So if you have excess gold, this is essentially the spender for that excess gold in this mechanic. But it's extremely worth it to do the gliders, because what you'll gain from them is probes, which is used for juicing both profound and deep-sized maps, which is the main appeal for the gliders. That's where most of your money is going to come from. Because you get stuff like this deep-sized probe, which is going to be worth 30 FE each. You'll get a decent amount of raw FE, and occasionally just get other stuff like compasses and embers, but not at least not in the same quantity as you would from airships. And if I can manage to find one, you will also have a special event like this pop up. These are counter events, or very rough to do. They're very difficult to do, especially if you're on like lower gear. But they have a massive quant multiplier to them. And essentially what you do is you go in, you spend like a minute just killing waves of enemies. That finishes off with 3 bosses spawning, these desert blight bosses. And instead of just getting like 1 or 2, you know, like 2 FE and like 1 probe, the amount of probes you gain from doing them is like significantly increased. Because you have this massive, extreme like quant multiplier. I believe the quant multiplier is 500% for doing the gliders. And that's essentially the out-of-map side of things. But I did mention that you get these materials from doing this, right? These materials that you get, these aromatic materials, are used to apply belt blends. And belt blends are very powerful like mechanics that can give you extra loot. Oh, sorry, extra power on your belts. In the early game, it's very common to like... Also, sorry, just a side note. If you don't want to access the belt blend menu, you can just right-click any aromatic material and it'll pop up the belt blend menu. Not a lot of people know about that, but it's very helpful to know. So, when you go into the belt blend menu, it's split up into 3 things: medium talents, core talents, and aromatic talents. You'll very often in the early game put some sort of medium talent on your belt, whether it's like +1 attack level, or maybe you'll put +1 max challenge stacks. You'll just put one of these on your belt because it's relatively cheap versus the amount of power you gain. And these modifiers are generally going to be in the power range of around 8 to 10% additional damage. Then you have the option to put on core talents. Now this is going to be significantly more expensive to do, but this is essentially putting a pedigree mod on your belt. So for example, if it's very important for your build to have source in it, you can just get source on your belt, for example. But it's going to come at this hefty price. You need 2 level 9 materials, 2 level 8 materials, and 2 level 7 materials, which especially early into the league, this will count up to a few thousand FE. Which is why it's generally not worth it to like put this on belts until you have a prices belt or like a best in slot legendary belt. And then the last tier is aromatic talents. So if there isn't any like core talent that you absolutely need for your build, it might be worth it for you to just use a aromatic talent. These are essentially the same as these core talents, but instead of them being pedigree mods or main talents that you can put on your belt, these are sandlord exclusive mods that can only be found on your belt. And these include some extremely powerful options, such as Rotted Taboo, which on Sage is very easy to survive this 100 secondary erosion damage. This is not that much damage to take every 0.1 seconds on Sage. To then gain +3 all skills, which is an insane damage increase. Or what I use on my belt is Divine Grace, which makes it that every blessing gives you +4% additional damage and -4% additional damage taken, which is a massive defense layer for Sage, because now I have 12 blessings that are all giving me -4% additional damage taken, which is an extreme amount of like just defense to gain from a belt blend, as well as quite a lot of damage. Now, with all of that covered, the last system, I guess the last thing to talk about is what does the compasses do? What do the pets do? And what does the talent trees, like the atlas, do? So to start off with the pets, we have Moonshadow Guide. Now Moonshadow Guide is a very interesting one. Her power spikes are at level 2 and level 6. There is value in like the other levels, but the 2 main levels to get her is level 2 and level 6. And obviously level 1. Level 1 is really good because once you have a level 1, you gain 12% additional trade and order reward quantity, as well as 6% additional raid reward quantity, which is quite powerful. And I forgot exactly what her baseline effect is. Let me look on IDB quickly. But once you get her to level 2, you gain access to the ability that when you start a trade, so you know those big trades you do once a day that bring you back like thousands of FE if you get lucky especially, there's now a 16% chance that whenever you send one of those trades out, it just immediately completes the trade, no wait time, and all the materials you put into the trade, you just get back immediately. Which essentially, you have a 16% chance to just send 2 trades in one day, instead of just 1. So instead of getting like 2,000 FE, you get 4,000 FE. Or instead of 3,000, you might get 6,000. So this is a very, very powerful node, which is why she has a very big power spike at level 2. At level 3, she does gain the ability that when she comes back from a trade, she has a chance to bring back a laborer, which I believe initially starts off at 5%, and then goes up to 10%, or no, sorry, it's 10% and then 20%. Now, this is a very interesting one as well, because the laborer that she does give you can be higher level than the maps that you're doing. So if your town is level 8, which getting to level 8 town is locked behind dragon. I did forget to mention this earlier, but you do need to progress on the dragon to get various levels of the town, and you'll often get to like the deep space town, which is level 8, before you're actually capable of farming deep space on your build. And then the only way to get level 8 kittens or catgirls that work for you is through this pet procking and bringing you back a level 8 worker. So while that's not really too big in the short term, it does add up over the long term and can just add up to a tiny bit of extra fee, but it's not that huge of a thing that I would worry about too much. And then at level 3, she gains access to just having more drop quant from raids, which is, you know, that's just quite nice. This is essentially the doubling. I believe her baseline effect is that she doubles the reward you can get. Let me just check. Yeah, so her baseline reward is this. When you complete a raid or trade order, there's a 50% chance that all the rewards will be replicated once at level 1, which is very powerful, obviously. And then she also has a proc that makes it that the loot in the raid has an extreme amount of additional drop quantity to it. This is not doubling, by the way, because there's already a lot of other drop quantity multipliers, but it is just a nice bonus on top. It's not a very big bonus, though, in the grand scheme of things, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's not a very important level breakpoint to reach. Then she gets another 10% chance to bring back a laborer. And at level 6, the chance to double the reward goes from 15% to 24%. So the most important levels for her is definitely level 1, level 2, and level 6. As always, though, level 1 is the most important to get, because at level 1, you just gain access to the generic drop like, additional quantity. And having this generic quantity is just always a big boon in any mechanic. As for the Atlas, or the Netherrealm chart, generally speaking, you're going to put 15 points up here, and in nothing else. But a very interesting thing about the sandlord mechanic is that this mechanic cannot naturally spawn your maps. So very often when you're mapping, you'll see like God of War pop up, you'll see Goddess of Hunting pop up. All these mechanics that just randomly show up, like Arcana. Oasis cannot show up naturally in your map. The only way to make Oasis spawn is to have at least 1 point in this tree to have them spawn. But you don't need to fully invest 15 points to have them spawn every map. Let's say your strat only has 5 points left that you can like spend it. It is still worth considering just putting 5 points into Sandlord here and having like 1 in every 4 maps spawn the Catgirls. Because generally speaking, just having the town up and running and just getting some gold is going to be like enough to sustain it, especially if you don't worry about having like 4 up-and gliders, you will have more than enough gold. This mechanic is pretty much not worth investing ever. You can take these points to like generate way more gold. These various points just spawn more waves and make it that the gold you do get is replicated, in other words, doubled, essentially. So the amount of gold you're generating goes up a significant amount. But if you are actively mapping, and especially if you're juicing, you will have enough gold at all times just doing sandlord naturally. This mechanic does scale with other mechanics, and the gold you get from it is not only from the circle. If you kill mobs on the map, you will get gold occasionally. And the more you juice your map, the more gold you'll get. So if you see here, we killed some just random mobs on the map, and we got 266 gold. 182 gold. And this gold you see here does scale with map juicing. Which means that if you're busy like doing some juiced farming, as long as you just have the oasis on your map occasionally, you're going to be generating a few thousand gold every map. Now, obviously, the amount of gold you do generate if you invest into the sandlord, into the mechanic itself, goes up significantly. But it is definitely worth considering just using your like spare leftover points from any other strat. Just putting some points in the spawning of it, and then slowly working your way up and getting the catgirls up and running. Now, with all that being said, when is this mechanic at its best, and when is it weak? I think Sandlord is extremely powerful day one of the league. If you like rush Sandlord like in the early time walks, and you're just doing it like from the get-go, it actually has a lot of like merit and power while you're leveling it up. Because very early on, everyone's leveling up their Sandlord. But the amount of people that need belt blends and that are just like buying cheap belts early on to get a belt blend is significantly higher than the amount of people that are like doing the Sandlord. And a lot of like generic cheap belt blends are early on going to sell for like 10, 15, 20 FE. Like if you drop a belt that has plus 1 attack skill level, you can sell this for like 30 FE probably. Plus 1 nasty blessing, you're going to sell this for 10 FE. This is going to sell for like 20 FE. Prices are like whatever. It's going to turn from season to season. And if you get lucky and you drop a plus 1 all skills belt, that's like easily over 200 FE day one. And because of that, like I do think the mechanic is very strong early on. And then it kind of should become a back burner mechanic after that. It should never be your main source of income. It shouldn't be like something that you prioritize mainly. It should just be something you just keep up and running in the background, just occasionally like working on it. Because eventually it'll pay off, but for the most part it's kind of just dead points and it's just like a long-term investment. But once you do reach the point where you have your town maxed out, you have enough dragon rankings to get to like level 7 town, you can start running it much more actively and making like 3000 FE every single day. Probably more than 3000 FE, like just make like, you know, an extra 5 to 10,000 FE every single day, just having the mechanic and just like 5 points into the mechanic. And that amount's just going to keep going up and up and up, like the more you invest into the mechanic. That being said, this mechanic does kind of pop off in deep space. I've had friends of mine whose strat was literally to just like do very early in the league deep space while the beacons are still somewhat cheap. They run like just generic deep space maps. They can't really like fully juice it with like all sorts of like insane things. So they put points into Sandlord. They run in, they do the Sandlord, they maybe do like some other easy mechanic, like maybe hunting or something. Or maybe Arcana. And then they go out and just doing Sandlord, nothing else, makes them 3k an hour. This mechanic really does have a lot of potential to it to make you a lot of money. But if you want to, you can just treat it as a settlers of the catgirl and just have it be something you like slowly work on in the background and just occasionally makes you money. I personally am actually a very big fan of the Sandlord mechanic. I, for the longest time, had the pet only level 2, but for the past like 2 or 3 seasons, I've been using all of my free legendary chests that I get to get the pet up to level 6. Because I feel like it's very worth it in almost any strat that I do to, instead of running a like 4th compass, like a 4th dropcon compass, to just run the Sandlord compass. There's only one compass for the Sandlord, which is just this, sand price appear on the stage. But if you run this in every single map, it will pay for itself tenfold easily. Because the amount of money you make by like constantly sending out gliders, you know, constantly doing these gliders as they finish every hour, as well as, or like every 30 minutes, as well as doing like your daily big load. That sounds wrong. As well as doing a daily big shipment to Utopia Island, will just end up with you making quite a fair amount of money. But anyway, that was my mechanic guide for the sandlord mechanic. It's a bit of a strange mechanic, at least for TLI standards, but it's a very cute and cool mechanic. It's really nice. I personally am a big fan of it. I love catgirls, and I love, I guess, owning them. Having them work for me willingly. I pay them good gold, okay? Thank you all so much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye.